everyone, and welcome to the Zoo Crew My Story podcast. My name is Kelly Kitty, and I am an alcoholic. Please be sure to subscribe, like, share, and comment on our videos so that YouTube will send them out to alcoholics looking for recovery. Today, we have myself, and I'm going to share my story of experience, strength, and hope for all of you. I'm going to tell you what it was like, what happened, but most importantly, what it's like now. Please keep in mind this will be going on an Alcoholics Anonymous website. Please keep the anonymity part of our program. So without further ado, I'm going to start my story. So my name is Kelly. I go by Kelly Kitty in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I currently live in North Carolina. However, I was born and raised in Southern California, and then spent a long time in Florida. I have been in and out of the rooms of AA since I was 15 years old. I started my journey into 12-step programs in Southern California for a pretty bad drug addiction. I got wrapped up in the music scene of Orange County, California, and got into some really nasty drugs. And I thought that I could be cool. I thought I could fit in. I thought I could get through all of my schoolwork, get everything done, be organized. And I think looking back now, I was really trying to self-medicate mental health issues. I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 40. I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety at the age of 10. Been going to therapy, in and out of therapy since I was 10 years old. But I think I really did try to self-medicate from a young age. And looking back now, I realize that non-alcoholics don't start stealing wine coolers from their parents when they're 12 years old. They don't go to their dad's bottle of tequila and drink it after school and then try to fill it with water and hope he doesn't notice. They don't go into their mom's cooking liquor that probably had been sitting there for 5 years because she really didn't drink, and drink it so that then when she went to go cook with it, it was only water. I thought that was normal, and that's what kids did after school. I thought it was normal to go into the back field of school and smoke pot. Or, we used to ditch high school at lunch and go across the street so we could get high. And, we started having beer at parties when I was 13 years old. That was just what I thought was normal. And I always wanted to fit in. I never felt like I was pretty enough. I always thought I was too fat, too tall, not good enough. I wasn't going to be cool. I wasn't part of the cheerleader group. My best friend since I was 9 years old was a cheerleader, and I never could be coordinated enough for that. And I never felt like I was pretty enough for that. And so I thought I would be cool hanging out with the punk rock kids, the musicians, the artists, the ones that I identified with. And I was able to have friends in all different groups. And, looking back now, I realized I was really just liked for me. People enjoyed being around me. I did not need to do all the things I was doing to try so hard. But at the time, I didn't believe that. And I wish I could go back to that young girl and tell her, you are enough. You are beautiful, and you are worthy of a good life. And you don't have to medicate your brain and try to escape from everything. But I didn't, I can't go back to that little girl. I can forgive her. I can go back and, let go of the resentments against that little girl and the people in my life at that time. But, there really wasn't an excuse for how I was acting other than I've always been an alcoholic. I've always been an addict, but when I came into the rooms at 15, I fought steps 1, 2, and 3 so hard. I couldn't admit I was an alcoholic. I thought I was only an addict, and I thought I was only an addict to the one drug. I didn't think I had a problem with smoking pot. I didn't think I had a problem with drinking. I knew I had a problem with cigarettes and caffeine, but I wasn't in meetings for that. And so I would just go in and say, I'm an addict. Hi, I'm Kelly, I'm an addict. But I didn't like NA meetings. I thought they were too sick. They were too crazy for me, even though I was one of them. But you couldn't explain that to a 15-year-old. So I found the rooms of AA and I found people that took me under their wing. I found mentors that still to this day, I am so incredibly thankful for. I met this lady named Irish Annie who taught me that, we are feisty Irish fighters and to use that feistiness for good, to go out and do something good with my life, and that I had power and that I needed to use that power in positive ways. And I was a little punk back then. Man, I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to be an addict. I didn't want to have to participate. All I wanted to do was sit outside and smoke, drink coffee. I went because I knew that I had to do something. I got arrested when I was like 15. So then I had to do meetings. I had to do probation. I got arrested for being in a car with like a 40-year-old drug dealer. And there were inappropriate pictures of me found in that car. And the police had to show them to my mom when she came to the police station to pick me up. And there were a lot of inappropriate pictures and a lot of inappropriate activity that older men did of me during those years. And I didn't think anything was wrong with it. I didn't really identify with the fact that sexual assault is a huge part of my story until what I call my official rape when I was 17. But really, I was being molested by older men while I was using the whole time. And lots of them, ones I don't even remember names or faces or anything. Some of those stories come back to me. And some of my story might be triggering. And so if you are triggered by sexual assault or trauma, then you might want to stop listening now because it is a huge part of my story and a huge part of my recovery. So I just want to give that warning. I hope it doesn't trigger you. I've gotten pretty good at talking about it to where it's safe for people, but I do respect that it can be triggering. So, I went through a lot of sexual trauma in those teen years, and it really, really impacted my relationships going forward, and my self-esteem, and my, you know, concept of my body and my value in this world. I pretty much always have just thought that that was the only thing I was good for to men, and I have to do that in order to be loved and accepted. And I became resentful, later on. And it's really impacted me, and it's really impacted my emotional sobriety. And I've had to do a lot of work on that. So, um, I heard those stories in the rooms. They would tell the stories. The women would tell the stories of the trauma that they experienced on the streets and in their homes. And it scared me, it scared me that if I continued to live in that world, that I was going to continue to be abused by the people living in that world. And I had a good family. I had a good house. I went to good schools. My parents did the best they could, loving me and supporting me. They still do. I have a younger sister and an older brother that, mean the world to me. And so I didn't have that part of my story that so many do. But I created these situations, inadvertently by putting myself into these dangerous positions, by running the streets, by being in rundown hotel rooms with drug dealers, and, overdosing and blacking out and waking up hours later with no idea where I was, who I was with, or what I had been given. I the day I finally surrendered to sticking with this program was the day I woke up in a hotel room with a bunch of grown men um, that had done really bad things to me while I was in that place. And I opened the refrigerator and cockroaches came running out at me. And I broke. I broke. I had been out of my mom's house for probably a few weeks by that point in time. She kind of given up on calling the cops on me anymore because I was just a runner. I wasn't going to stay home, you know. I was just going to leave and run the streets. I snuck out the window and up over the back gate and was gone all the time. You know, I didn't want to be in my life, so I was out on the streets. And that day I went to my dad's. They had bought me a one-way plane ticket to New York to my aunt's house. And I was supposed to get on that plane. And I went to my dad's house and I said, I need help. I need help. And I hid there. You know, I didn't get on that plane and I hid in the protection of my dad's house. And I lived with him for probably another year. It was like almost 17 when I officially moved out on my own. And by then I had dropped out of school. I had been in art school and I dropped out of high school. And so I went back. I went to independent studies and was able to get my diploma. Actually ended up speaking at my graduation as like valedictorian of the, you know, School of Hard Knock Life kids, pretty much. Um, my parents were so proud. uh, yeah. But then I went to college. You know, I started college and I started doing psychology and child development and, you know, decided I was going to actually do something with my life. And I was in meetings. So I was going to meetings all the time. And the people in those rooms at the time, God, they just took me under their wing and they didn't give up on me. And they loved me until I could love myself. They took care of me. You know, I was still a young girl in there being harassed by older men because there's still sick people everywhere you go. But the good, solid people in this program made sure to protect me and not let anyone mess with me. And, you know, Irish Annie, remember she said, you know what, kid, you don't have to sit in the damn chair. But if you're gonna throw it, because I would knock chairs over because I was angry, you know. If you're gonna knock the chairs over, then you're gonna stay after the meeting and you're gonna help me clean them all up. So I'd clean up chairs. And then they would say, if you're just gonna stand outside and smoke all the time, then you're gonna clean ashtrays. And I learned I really hated cleaning ashtrays. So then they found the real way to keep me coming back. I was working at a coffee shop. I held down that job even through the drugs. They helped me get sober. They were there for me. They were a family for me. I worked at that coffee shop for 7 years. And so they said, you know what, coffee girl? We're going to sign you up for service and you're going to make coffee. And they knew that I wasn't going to let them down. I wasn't going to let those little people down. They needed their caffeine. And so I showed up and I made the coffee. And I had a really hard time sitting still. Like I said, I've always had ADHD. It just wasn't diagnosed till I was an adult. But I had a hard time sitting still. And I really had a hard time sitting still with things that were uncomfortable. And hearing the honesty in those rooms and hearing the reality of what I could and would go on to face as an adult at times was too much for me. And so I started drawing. I started drawing in meetings. And, you know, like I said, I had gone to art school prior to that. And I found that if I did my art while I was listening to meetings, I heard things. There was a sense of peace that I could get to that I've later learned was my first experiences with meditation, quieting my mind, getting to a spot where I could focus. And so they got me coloring books and crayons and at Thursdays, which was one of the Alano clubs that I frequented and had service commitments at in Sunset Beach, California. and my coloring books and crayons sat there by the coffee station. And whenever I would come to meetings, which there were times when I would spend hours there, I would color and I would do service and I would make thousands and thousands of gallons of coffee. And I called everyone in those rooms the old people, which is hilarious now that I am the old person in the rooms. But I started to bring in young people. And they say this is a program of attraction, not solicitation. And people started to see changes in me. They started to realize that I wasn't wanting to die, that I had found something that was actually helping my mind. And so I started to get more young people in there and I started a young people's group. And I had multiple service commitments. I went to meetings all the time. I frequented Howe Hall in Huntington Beach. That was one of my homes, Sunset and or Thursdays in Sunset Beach. And then I had a Sunday coffee commitment at Alice's Breakfast in the Park in Huntington Beach, which is the same park my parents had gotten married at. And that was special to me. So I did. I worked with a sponsor. I worked my steps. It took me a long time to work my steps because, like I said, I fought steps 1, 2, 3. Once I could finally admit that I was an addict, I still couldn't admit I was an alcoholic. I wasn't drinking, I was at least sober then. But I couldn't get over the God thing. I didn't believe in anything. I challenged everything in life. And I didn't like churches. I had started to go to different churches and I thought that they were cults. I still think a lot of them are cults. I still have an issue with organized religion. In fact, I had to do a 4th step on organized religion. And the way I do my living amends to that is that I do try churches and give them a chance. I look for churches that specifically are open and affirming to all, and I give them a chance and I listen now, which before I wouldn't listen. And but I had people in here that in order to get through those steps, they had to really break it down to me. And this is the section of the big book that really did it for me. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. Now, I wouldn't say him, I used to say it. Okay. I don't know who my higher power is. I do attend non-denominational churches where they do say Jesus Christ. I don't know that that is necessarily my God, but I have a God today. I have a higher power. And then it says to us, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all-inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all men, or I say to all people. This book is old, and back then it was men. When therefore we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. Your own conception. Nobody was telling me who my God had to be in AA. In churches, they told me who my God had to be. Not the church my parents went to, it was really open, but the ones that I tried to go to with my friends, they all wanted to tell me who my God was supposed to be. And AA said, no, it's your own conception of God. But you have to put your ego aside, get out of your own damn way, and realize that there is a power greater than you. And, one person took me down to the beach in Huntington Beach, to the ocean, and the waves were crazy that day. And they said, look at, this infinite body of water and these, massive waves, and tell me that there's not something in this world bigger than us. And then we were looking at a rainbow in the sky. And they said, look at that and tell me that there's not something bigger than humans that can create that type of beauty. And that hit me that I could find my God in nature, in rainbows, in the ocean, in flowers, in butterflies. And that worked for me. And I found my God in the rooms of AA. There were times when the fellowship was my higher power, um, but not today. Today, I have a higher power that I talk to throughout the day, every day. I pray multiple times a day. I have no problem doing any of the Christian prayers. The Lord's Prayer used to bother me when I came in as a teenager. Now I love it. It means a lot to my program now. It's a part of my program, just like the Serenity Prayer is a part of my program. Um, I'll get back to the St. Francis prayer, but that's a daily part of my existence too. Upon awakening, when we retire at night, the 11th step prayers, I do those daily and I meditate daily now. So once I was able to overcome those first three steps, admitting that I was powerless over my substance abuse, admitting that there was a power greater than myself, and turning my life and my will over to that higher power, then I was okay moving forward with the steps. The fourth step wasn't that hard for me the first time I did it. The last time I did my fourth step was a hard one. I did it on my husband, and it was very, very difficult. But back then, the four steps weren't that bad. And when I went back and worked my steps later on against the people who had raped me and assaulted me, those ones weren't that bad either. Because I realized at that point that I had a higher power, that I wasn't going to let these situations control me anymore. And that if I just wrote them down and turned them over to my higher power in step 6 and 7, that it was going to be okay. I realized that I had a road to freedom. I had something that was going to work for me. And I'll tell you, I have done therapy and medication since I was 10 years old. And it doesn't work for me by itself. It takes me working my steps and working my daily program too. It's the only thing that works. But I decided that I was good enough. I had worked my steps. I had sponsored. I used to speak on panels. We used to go with my home group. We would go and do a lot of outreach. And I remember we would go up to Skid Row in LA, the most dangerous areas of homeless people ever. And part of it was to scare me, right? They wanted me to see what could happen if I kept going back out, because relapse was a huge part of my story during those years. And so I did get scared. I got really scared. But we would pack up brown bag lunches and walk around the parks and distribute them. And at one point, they asked me to do a panel in that park. And I remember saying, what do all of these raging addicts, with mental health issues, far larger than mine and experiences, decades beyond what I had experienced, what can they learn from me speaking? This 16-year-old little punk rock kid who had a drug addiction. And they said, you never know who's listening. And you never know when your story can help someone. And so I did panels. I spoke at conventions. Like I said, I was very active in the AA community in Southern California during those years. But then I thought I could do it the Kelly way. So I really dove into my nonprofit work. I was working with abused kids. Then I went into work with domestic violence shelters, got really involved with that. And I used my recovery story as a way to provide experience, strength, and hope to the women and the children that were going through those shelters. And then I took my rape and sexual assault, and I used it to go out and do outreach in schools. And so I worked with the hospital in the town I lived at in California, Northern California. I worked with the police department, and I went into the high schools and I talked to the students about the dangers of dating violence the dangers of sexual assault and the statistics that show that substance use and abuse drastically increase the chance of dating violence and sexual assault. And that had I not been living in a drug world, I could have avoided a lot of that. And the night that I was raped when I was 17, my ex-husband and I were roommates, and he was drunk and passed out in the room next door. And he never forgave himself for that he couldn't wake up to hear me crying for help when that was happening. And, that's something that I would talk about, that when you're that intoxicated, you can't keep the people around you safe, you can't keep yourself safe. And so it was really important that I talked to other teenagers, and hopefully at least one of them heard something and didn't get into the positions that I got into. So I dove into that work and, kind of went in and out of meetings throughout the years, but drank and continued to drink. But I wasn't a daily drinker. I mean, my drinking progressed, but I definitely would drink too much. I have never known when that limit was. So I would drink a lot, when I did drink. And I had periods where I wouldn't drink, and pregnancies, of course. And, there were times when it wasn't a big part of my life, but then I would go and pick it up and I would overindulge. And the thing was, though, my mental health started to get worse. My depression got worse throughout the years. I went on and had really good friends, actually, some really great friends throughout the years. And I became best friends with my old roommate's younger brother, who was a recovering addict, but was not working a program at all. And I took him to some meetings. We talked about recovery, and we would spend, hours just laying in the hammock in my backyard, just talking about life and, what happened when we were using and what our life would look like had we not let addiction, run its course with us. And we talked about what would happen if we died and all those things. And then, so that was my JJ. And his nickname for me was Kelly Kitty. And he would walk into my house and he would yell, "Kelly Kitty, where's my kitty cat?" And I can still hear him yell, "Kelly Kitty." And so when I came back into the rooms this time around, October 19th of 2025, it was only appropriate when I had to choose a Zoom name that I was Kelly Kitty. Because Kelly Kitty reminds me that I can keep going on, and that I can pick up the phone that he was too scared to pick up, and I can ask for sober support, and I can ask for help. And he didn't call me when he needed to. He didn't pick up that phone because he thought he would bother me, I guess, to tell me that he had relapsed. And he went to a clinic to try to get clean off of his drug of choice, and he ended up ODing on those drugs. And I got a call. I had moved from Southern California to Florida. Well, I got a call from his sister, who was my old roommate, who said, "I need you to make the decision. Did you and JJ ever talk about death?" And I said, "Yeah, a lot." She's like, "What would he want to do? I need you to make this decision." So I turned off life support on him that day. And I flew back to California, and I planned his funeral, and we did it in his sister's backyard. And it was the biggest AA and NA meeting you could imagine. There were so many people in recovery in that backyard. And I don't know if any of those people are still alive, but I hope they they stayed sober. And I hope that they remember JJ whenever they get that urge to use. And I hope that they remember to pick up the phone because I know I do. So that's Kelly Kitty, and that's why that's my name. Because I don't want people to tell my story in the past. Like I have to tell his story in the past. I want to be here to tell my story today. So yeah, I continued drinking throughout my 20s and 30s, but it really got worse. It got a lot worse, and I had my first weight loss surgery, and that really impacted my drinking. I really realized that I could drink, and the feeling was so much more intense. And then I learned I could black out. And at first, that freaked me out a lot. It still freaks me out, the fact that I don't remember days, weeks, and there's so many things I don't remember, but I was able to escape. And for me, that's what I wanted. I wanted to escape from myself. And drinking was a solution to that. And I always thought, well, at least I'm not going back to drugs. At least I'm just drinking, socially acceptable at least. And then COVID hit, and it became really acceptable to drink at home during the day, whenever, in the driveway. And so I did. I would just sit there and drink. And I got remarried 9 years ago, and I went from having one kid to five, and I was overwhelmed. And instead of, being normal about it and doing counseling and learning my tools and all those things, I would work my job and raise the kids and then drink at night, every night. And fast forward to the last few years, my mother-in-law passed away, and I was very close to her. And I just really spiraled. My drinking just got a lot more intense. And I did another weight loss surgery, and then the drunk got even worse. The alcohol went straight through me, and I could just go from a little buzz to full-blown blackout in like one sip. And I never knew where that line was, and I crossed it all the time. And things were rocky with my marriage. I wasn't honest about my feelings, my past. I never thought he wanted to listen or he would understand. And he didn't grow up like I did. And he didn't understand my stories the way the people in these rooms understand. We understand each other. So I just didn't talk about it. And I had moved from Florida up to North Carolina with my son, and we were alone. And I hated the house that I was living in up there. I felt isolated. I was living in the basement, and it felt like a dungeon. So I felt like I was in prison all the time. And I was in this prison in my mind. And my mental health was just going downhill. And my son was upset. He was feeling, a lot of pain from moving. And my husband was still in Florida, and he started battling health stuff, and we just were disconnected. We weren't talking, and we weren't being honest with each other about our feelings and needs. And so I just drank and drank and drank. And I had a couple friends up there that just knew that it was not safe for me to be there. Like it was, it was not good. It was not a good situation. And the day that everything kind of imploded, I was in that basement and I was walking up the stairs. My son was scared to be in the house, like upstairs by himself. So I was going upstairs to sleep up there with him, and I fell. And I fell on the stairs, and I slammed my head into a cinder block wall, and was knocked unconscious. And I wasn't even drunk at that time. Um, and I think we can kind of figure out that I was probably out for at least a half hour when my 7-year-old found me. And I took my phone and put it in front of my face to activate it and called my friends up there. No, they came over and they got me off those stairs and I was covered in blood and um, I refused to go to the hospital. No way I was going to go to the hospital. And so they put me on the couch and they called my husband in Florida, which I didn't want them to call him. I just didn't want to talk to him or see him. And they called him and he left work and immediately started driving up there. And somewhere in that time where I was, dealing with that head injury, I proceeded to drink an entire bottle of wine. And I think I drank tequila too, because I went and found that bottle lower. And I don't remember any of that, none of it. I have a little bit of a flashback of my friend picking me up off the stairs, but that's it. And I went to the hospital and my blood alcohol was like 3 times the legal limit. And, they looked at my husband and said, like, she needs help. She can't be alone like this. And I'm trying to tell the doctor, I don't drink that much. Yeah, right. And I was malnourished. Everything was just shutting down. And that's what I wanted. At that time, I was praying to God to just take me. Every night I would go to sleep and I'd say, just take me in my sleep. I never had the courage to take myself out because I didn't want my kids to have to tell that story. And so every time that I wanted to do it, I would just think about them. And my kids struggle from depression and anxiety too. And I just thought, I'm going to turn them into addicts if I do this. So I didn't. But I wanted to die. And I knew I needed help. And I knew I needed my family. And I had been drinking every day for months at that point, so much. I was drinking so much. And so I packed up in a state of complete alcohol psychosis. Packed up my kid and my dog and took off towards California so I could get to my family. And I was was freaked out, But I got sober enough to drive. I only made it about an hour before I was so sick I had to stop at a hotel. My friends came to the hotel to take care of my son. My mom had food and Pedialyte sent over there. And I spent 24 hours in that hotel in full DTs, which are, detoxing from heavy alcohol use. I was hallucinating. I was suffering paranoia. I was dry heaving for 24 hours straight. I couldn't stop sweating. I couldn't move. I couldn't even walk to go walk the dog out. And my mom just sat there on the FaceTime with my son to make sure he stayed safe. And my friend came to the hotel to take care of him and to check on me. And she called my mom and said, you need to get her. You need to get out here. She's not going to make it. She's not going to make it to California. And so my mom got on a plane and I made it as far as Tennessee and then met her at the airport. And she was going to keep driving with me to California, try to help get me some help. And I said, no, I need to go back and face these fears. All I've been doing is running all my life. I need to go back and face the fears of this house. And so we went back to that house and my mom said, this is so unsafe. This is not a safe place for you. You're 30 minutes from town. You can scream on the deck and nobody will hear you. There was, tons of stairs everywhere and it was a complete construction zone because I just kept thinking if I changed things, I hated the house. but it really, I hated myself. I hated my life, right? So I thought if I paint the house, if I remodel it, maybe I'll like it. If I do this, it was always if I change relationships, if I move, if I, you know, um, buy a house, change a job, all the different things that alcoholics do to try to change the people, places, and things without changing ourselves. And I was never dealing with what the real problem was. Um, and so I just would, keep doing the same crazy behavior and trying to solution it with a bottle. And during that time, some bad stuff happened at that house. Had a handyman that was working on it that was in recovery. And then it turns out he wasn't really in recovery. He knew I was taking off to California, robbed the house, and I know my husband really blames me for that. And yeah, there was some bad stuff. And so I in that hospital, my husband said, I'm taking you back to Florida where he was living. And so I went back to try to get healthier. And I had already developed this total sense of isolation. And so when I went to go live in this campground, I was scared to drive. I didn't want to leave the gates of the campground, but I was trying not to isolate. So I started to make friends in there. And I had a lot of fun in that campground. But I drink every day still with a traumatic brain injury, with a concussion. They took me off work for like 6 weeks because I needed to recover from my injury. I had really shaken up my brain, and I had black eyes from like a skull fracture, and um, was just, like I said, very malnourished. And but I kept drinking, and I would hide it from my husband. He would go to work, and I would, take the trash out so he couldn't see how much I had drank. And then I would go down to the bar and play poker and bingo and drink more. And my son would be playing with all the kids, and I was with the neighbors and stuff, so they kind of were keeping an eye on me. And one day I went down there, and like I was saying, with my surgery, I could just go just over the edge really fast, and I hadn't even drank the amount that I normally drink. Because I always play that game, like I'm gonna switch from liquor to beer. I'm not gonna drink tequila. I'm not gonna drink this. I'm not gonna do this. Let me switch to wine. All the things that don't work. And so that night I was like, oh, I'm just gonna drink light beer. I'll be fine. And I fell again. Still not recovered from my other head injury. I fell again. And they had to call 911. And they called my husband at work, and he had to come and meet me at the hospital. And my son was terrified. He had to ride in the ambulance with me, and I was unconscious again. I don't remember any of it. And we got to the hospital, and I don't even know what they said to him because, like I said, I don't remember it. But I remember just wanting to die. And I do remember a nurse, a nice nurse, and telling her that I wanted to die. And I really did. I really, really did. Um, yeah, I had no desire to keep going in this world. Um, I had my 7-year-old with me all the time. And I think that I was never supposed to be able to have kids again. I went through a lot of fertility treatments to have my first daughter, who passed away during pregnancy, and then went through fertility to have my other child, who's 15, lives with their dad. And I think God gave me my 7-year-old to give me a reason to keep living, because My husband took him that next day when I got back from the hospital, and he wouldn't leave him with me. And that was the first day he and I had been apart in, I don't know, years. And I remember I just wanted to stay in that camper and take my life that day. I knew that my son was with his older sister and would be safe. I knew that my family would help take care of him, and I was just ready to go. And I almost did it. And I dropped to my knees that day in the camper. I can remember exactly where it was. It was right next to the dining room table. Gotten up out of the bed, dropped to my knees, and I said, God, please help me. If I'm supposed to live, please help me. And I knew where I needed to go. I knew where the solution was. I used to always say that AA really screwed up my drinking. It did, because I would be drunk and I would say, I need help. I need to get back and work my steps. I had just told a friend a few months prior that the only way I was gonna get help was to come back in here. And so I picked up the phone that day and looked up AA meetings around me. And then I realized I couldn't drive. I was in no position to drive. I looked at my hospital labs that were sitting there on the table, and I realized that I was in kidney failure and my liver enzymes were through the roof. And I was truly killing myself. And it was going to be a slow and painful death if I let alcohol be the one to take me out. And I found Inner Group, and I found this thing called the Zoo Crew. And I thought, that's a funny name. And I logged in, and it was a Sunday, and it was a super speaker Sunday. And I sat there all day, and I turned my camera on and stared at myself on that Zoom video with black eyes, bloody busted lip. I took pictures that day, and I used them to remind myself of where I was and where I am now. And I heard strength and hope in those stories, and I stayed. And I remembered back to Irish Annie, and I remember when she was dying, she said, I'm okay dying because it's cancer taking me out and not alcohol. And I remember thinking, I don't want someone to tell my story and say that alcohol is what took me out. And so I got sober that day, and I lost all desire to drink alcohol in that moment. And when I had worked steps 1, 2, and 3 before, I never had that spiritual awakening. I didn't have some big, huge aha God moment like people had talked about. This time around, when I worked those steps, I had that spiritual awakening. I had that moment of absolute desperation and knew that there was no people, places, or things that could get me sober other than my higher power and Alcoholics Anonymous and the millions or thousands, however many people before me that have worked these steps and gone on to live or die sober. And so I did what I knew to do, and that was to immediately jump into service. And so I did. I got trained for the service team and I started to host meetings. I would do security every day. Um, I can't time. It's always the running joke. I'm so bad at timing. I forget to hit start. I forget to hit stop. I get distracted. I start listening to someone speak, and then it's like, oh, whoops. You've been talking for 5 minutes, and I had a 2.5 minute timer that I forgot to hit start on. And so that's kind of a running joke in here with me and timing. But I found ways to do service. There's so many ways to do service in AA. And, at the beginning, I made coffee. Now I found I found my passion, which is hosting workshops and sponsoring and reaching out to the newcomers, because I relate with the newcomers because I was there in that moment of not knowing if I could go on, not knowing if I could live without drinking, but knowing I couldn't live with drinking. And one thing that I was so freaked out about is, I get hit on a lot in this program. I have people that message me and, all kinds of stuff, and I'm not here for that. I'm here to get sober and to work my program. And the thing that I respected about the Zoo Crew and about John A. was that he keeps these rooms safe. We take security very seriously. We take anti-harassment very seriously. And people can argue that and say, oh, well, we were just trying to be nice. Okay. But there's a lot of harassment that happens, and there's a lot of people that have ulterior motives. And we just don't have tolerance for that. You come in here, you work a program. I always say the women should stick with women and the men should stick with men. However, I say that to newcomers because as a newcomer, it is important. You're not here to meet your future husband on day one, okay? But I will say I would not be alive today without the brothers that I have in this program. So yes, while I love my sisters and I love my female tribe, I also love my freaking brothers. And I love that I know that no matter what, John will have my back and keep me safe in here. And that means a lot to me. And this has become a family. This has become a home. And yeah, of course, I meet people I don't get along with. There's personalities. We're all alcoholics, I mean, it happens, right? But I don't ever leave this group. This is my home group. It'll always be my home group. It'll always be my family. I really reclaimed my life in this group. And the mentors I have in here, they don't let me slip. They don't see me for a day, they message me. They hear me cry, I get a call. I made my best friend in here. We have 11 days between us in sobriety. And I can talk about everything and anything with some of my friends in here. Things that I haven't been able to talk about because people that aren't alcoholics won't understand it, or they don't want to understand it, or they want to rewrite my story, or they want to tell me their version of their role in my story. And that doesn't help my sobriety at all. And so I know that I can come in here and be safe to tell my story. And maybe my story isn't the full truth. That's possible. I'm an alcoholic. I was sick when I was drinking. I don't remember a lot of it. So yeah, my version of the truth may be fuzzy, but it's mine and it's my story. And I'm safe to tell it in here. And so it was New Year. So that's my past, right? That's my experience. But I want to tell you about some of my strength and hope. I want to give you what I have found that has saved my life in the Zoo Crew that I did not get in my early years of AA, that I don't get going to in-person meetings, that I've gotten in here. And that's what I want to talk about. So I knew my steps. I worked my steps multiple times throughout my life, but I didn't understand the promises. I didn't really truly study the promises until this time around. And now when I read these promises, if we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, and they will always materialize if we work for them. And those promises are what keep me up and going every day. And being able to share my experience and being able to share my favorite book in the world, which is the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, with other people, to be able to watch people work through their steps gives me a sense of purpose through my pain. And, I have a long way to go still. I have damaged relationships that I need to try to mend. I have a son probably all my kids need to probably get through some therapy, but my 7-year-old for sure. He was there. He was there in the darkest days. And he was there to pick me up off those stairs. And he was there to protect me. And he's part of my sobriety. He's a big part of my sobriety. He jumps in and says hi in the zoo meetings. He loves my zoo friends. He can sing all the songs in all the words to the Chip song. He'll tell everyone, we don't drink no matter what. And it's really special to watch that. We went to an in-person meeting yesterday, and this group pays a babysitter. Oh, so beautiful. They pay a babysitter at this church. And so we got to play with other kids that are kids that have grown up like he has with broken mom, and he had so much fun. So much fun. And I met these women there, these other moms that, can probably give me a fierce in-person tribe. It will never replace my relationship and my family here with the zoo crew, but it'll be nice for me to make some friends in my new area. But one thing I want to tell you about is my experience with my best friend, who I will keep anonymous. But it was New Year's Eve, and we were both going through new places and changes and big scary things in our life, and we were scared. We didn't know what to do, bored. We didn't want to isolate, but we were isolating, and so we were like, well, we got to try to keep connected somehow. So we decided to spend New Year's Eve in the zoo crew and watch the ball drop. And we were sitting there messaging, and a good friend in this program, real good friend of mine, who I actually met back when the year he got sober. I was 16 years old. I met him, and I met another lady in here too, when I was younger in California. And now they're in the zoo crew, and they both have, decades of sobriety. And he was going to be hosting his first workshop. And it was the 12 steps in 4 hours. And I remember messaging my friend, you can't work 12 steps in 4 hours. How is he going to do this? And I said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" He's like, "Nothing." And I was like, "Well, me either. Should we go and support my friend?" And he was like, "Okay." And we go, and it was chaos. Oh my God, there were so many people. I've never seen so many people show up to a workshop. And then my friend had like a family emergency in the middle of hosting it. And so, like, we had to jump in. My bestie and I jumped in and like took over the script of this workshop along with this other girl. And we're all like trying to run this workshop that none of us have hosted. We didn't know what we're doing. I don't know if anyone else got anything out of it that day, but most of them have come back and retaken that workshop with us since then. So it's all good. And it's a fun story to tell. But somewhere in that New Year's craziness, I don't know if it was a New Year's resolution or what. I don't even remember the conversation, but we just decided, hey, we should try hosting this workshop. And so we committed ourselves for the month of January to host this workshop every Saturday for 4 to 5 hours. And we check in. We were only going to do it the first month, and we check in with each other at the end of each month, and we just keep signing ourselves up for more. And I think we've done like 13 weeks now of hosting that workshop. And he's a total math nerd, so he's done the mathematical numbers of it. And I don't know, I think he said we've taken like 200 people through the 12-step in 4 hours workshop. And we if each of those people go and help another, 3 people, it's like there's a potential chance that we've helped thousands of people somehow in his math equation. And if just 1 or 2 of those got something out of it, then our past 3 months have been so worth it. And every week when we go through those 12 steps, I'm reworking my steps right along with the people in those rooms. And I'm having to relook at my character defects. And I had to do another 4-step a couple weeks ago because I got into a fight with a friend. And immediately my head spiraled to, oh my God, we're fighting. That means I'm never going to talk to this person again. And I'm not lovable and I'm not worthy. And, I'm never going to have a friend this good again. And blah, blah, blah. All the craziness that I can so easily do if I don't truly take a look at myself and my defects of character and work through them and write them down and look at the opposite of those defects and look at what I can actually strive towards. And so once I did that, once I realized that my pride and my ego and my selfishness and self-seeking, self-centeredness, my dishonesty, my self-delusion, my anger. Oh my God, I'm feisty. Once I realized that those things don't need to be a part of who I am, and that I can be a patient person and a kind person and loving and trusting and put myself into service of others, then I'm spiritually free and not sick anymore. And so every week I look and make sure that there's no people, institutions, or principles that I'm angry at. And if I was angry, I look and see, are any of my character defects coming out? Do I need to make amends to anyone? And I work through that. And I do that too daily with my 10th step. And I always say in that workshop, all steps that start with the number 1 can be done from day 1 and every day for the rest of your life. Every day I admit I'm an alcoholic. Every day I do a daily inventory and see if I was wrong. And then every day I do my 11th step prayers and I am of service in some way or another with my 12th step. And so those are my steps that start with 1 that are a part of my daily life. And then, when I host the workshops, then I also work through all the other steps too. And so we've taken hundreds of people through these, and we're about to reevaluate what April's going to look like. But I secretly hope that we don't do this workshop every Saturday for the month of April, because I want other people to reap the benefits and the beauty that we have gained from hosting that workshop. I hope that enough people have gone, the 200 people that have gone through this workshop have thoroughly worked their steps to a point where they are now fully willing and able to sponsor others and to host this workshop and do a better job than we did of hosting the workshop. And, one thing that we implemented, because we realized it was too much for just one of us. And so one thing we implemented was we started a breakout room. And multiple times when we get to the fifth step, which is where you're admitting it to someone else and to God, I'm able to do a breakout room and go in there with someone and hear fifth steps for people that are not my sponsees. And I've gained sponsees out of that workshop. I have 4 sponsees. I've had quite a few others too. I've taken many people through these steps, and that's just been a beautiful thing for both of us. I can see so much growth in both of us since when we came in here in October, and just looking at where we're at now, where our lives are at, the fact that we're both at peace being alone now, when we were so codependent and could not be alone, and we were in these, new places and trying to learn how to be alone. And now we're both content with that. And we can talk and be honest and open. And it's a friendship that is very deep. And I have a few of those now in here. I've got people I can call up that I can say, I'm not okay today. And they're right there. And I don't have to explain. I just have to say, I'm not okay. Will you just sit with me? And the only thing I wish is that I could just hug them when I need it. And that's hard to just do virtual hugs. But with the Zoo Crew, I have hugged people in here. I have gotten to meet some people, and I'm going to the Atlantic City meetup to where I can hug a lot of you. And I'm going on the cruise in October with the Zoo Crew. And that's a beautiful friendships that I've made in here. And I've learned to just be a better person. And I found that the words I had learned when I was 15, 16 are so true today. I always thought those old people that had these stories that were so much worse. I was never going to be a mom who drank in front of her kids, but never going to be that, corporate successful employee who would drink at night. I mean, come on. I would listen to these stories like, whatever, I'm not that person. And I became that person. And those words ring truer to me now than they ever did, that there is a solution. Almost none of us liked the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had to come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a 4th dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed. And the great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. That's page 25. There is a solution in the big book. Everything you need to know is in those first 164 pages of the big book. I hope those are the right pages. I think those are the right pages. Anyways, it's all in the book. It's all in the steps. And if you can just check your ego at the door, follow this simple program, find a higher power that works for you, and realize that if your way wasn't working, you might need to do it God's way. And you might need to do it this way. And I'm going to end with this. Well, first, I'm going to do a disclosure because, like I said, I did bring up some triggering things. So I want you to know, if you are in a situation that is unsafe, if you are in a situation where you have experienced domestic violence, sexual assault, get help. Call for help. If you are having thoughts of suicide, call the suicide prevention hotline. Don't wait until it's too late. Don't be another statistic. There is hope for you, and you can go on to live a life that is beautiful. But you have to say, I am ready to surrender and I am ready to ask for help. And if you need help with that, and you need help working these steps, and you need help finding the solution like I did, come find me. I'm always here. I'm always willing to lend an ear, give you some experience, strength, and hope, and share the beautiful tools that I keep in my tool belt in this program. And come to the workshops with me. You'll be rocketed into the fourth dimension too. So now I'm going to close with my favorite prayer that I use every day. And it reminds me what I need to do. And it's the 11th step prayer, the St. Francis prayer. Lord, make me a channel of thy peace, that where there is hatred, I may bring love, that where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness, that where there is discord, I may bring harmony, that where there is error, I may bring truth, that where there is doubt, I may bring faith, that where there is despair, I may bring hope, that where there are shadows, I may bring light, that where there is sadness, I may bring joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in the giving that we receive, it is in the pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in the dying that we are born to eternal life. So I challenge you, where you have sadness in your life, go spread joy. And that when you're feeling doubtful, have faith. Have faith in a higher power and have faith in this program. And that where you have done wrong, I pray for forgiveness for you. And I pray that you become a channel of peace in these rooms and in this world, because there is so much hatred in this world. But you have the power to just bring love. And that's what we do in here. We love one another. And if you can't love yourself, I promise, pull up a virtual chair next to me and I will love you until you can love yourself. I am Kelly Kitty, and I am, always have been, even though I didn't admit it, and always will be, an alcoholic. I give you love and peace. So thank you for listening to my story today. I hope that our members will enjoy listening to it. I wish you a great day and that you keep trudging the road of happy destiny. I hope you enjoyed listening to this and that you subscribed and liked our videos. Please feel free to share our videos along with our website and podcast link, because these stories could help another person that needs to find these rooms. Our website is www.thezoocrew.com. And our YouTube channel is Our Podcast AA. Thank you for listening. Bye.